My brother Marcus stood in my new Tribeca penthouse, his face twisted with rage as he screamed about stolen inheritance. But what he did not know was that I had spent 3 years quietly building the case that would destroy him. The same brother who had embezzled our family trust manipulated our dying father and left me with nothing while he lived like royalty. Today he would learn that every dollar in this penthouse came from exposing his crimes. Justice had been expensive, but oh so worth it. Before we dive into how I turned the tables on my manipulative brother, drop a comment letting me know where you are watching from. Hit that like button if you have ever dealt with family betrayal and subscribe, because this story has twists that will leave you speechless. Trust me, you need to hear how this revenge unfolded step by step. My name is Lydia Montenegro, and 6 months ago, I was a struggling graphic designer living in a studio apartment in Queens, wondering how I would ever afford anything better. My brother Marcus, 3 years older, lived in a stunning Upper East Side townhouse, drove luxury cars, and seemed to have unlimited access to family money. For years, I had accepted his explanations about his successful investment firm and his natural business acumen. Our father, Roberto Montenegro, had built a successful chain of Mediterranean restaurants across New York and New Jersey. When he was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease at 68, Marcus immediately stepped in to help manage his affairs. I was grateful someone was handling the complicated business matters while I focused on spending quality time with Papa during his lucid moments. The first red flag appeared during one of my visits to Papa. He grabbed my hand with surprising strength and whispered urgently, "Lydia mija, where is the money for your wedding? I set aside $200,000 for when you find someone special." Marcus said he would make sure you got it. I had never mentioned wanting a wedding fund, but Papa had always been generous about planning for our futures. When I asked Marcus about it later, he laughed dismissively. "Papa is confused, Lydia. His memory is shot. There was never any specific wedding fund. You know how he gets fixated on random ideas now." But Papa brought it up again the following week, and then again. Each time his story remained consistent, while Marcus' explanations grew more irritated. "You cannot take everything he says seriously anymore," Marcus snapped when I pressed him. "The man thinks it is still 1995 half the time." The second warning came from Maria Santos, Papa's longest-serving restaurant manager. She had worked for him for 22 years and knew every detail of the business operations. During a casual conversation at Papa's bedside, she mentioned how surprised she was that he had decided to sell the Queens location. "What do you mean, sold it?" I asked, my stomach dropping. Maria looked confused. "Marcus said your father wanted to liquidate some assets to simplify things. He handled all the paperwork about 3 months ago. I thought you knew." That night, I could not sleep. I started making a list of every strange comment, every inconsistency, every time Marcus had deflected my questions about family finances. The pattern was becoming impossible to ignore. I decided to visit the family lawyer, Jonathan Wright, who had handled Papa legal affairs for over a decade. Wright had always been straightforward with our family, and I hoped he could provide clarity about what was really happening with Papa assets. "I am concerned about some discrepancies," I told him carefully, not wanting to make direct accusations yet. "Can you help me understand the current status of my father's estate planning?" Wright's expression grew troubled. "Lydia, I have been wondering when someone from the family would ask these questions. Marcus has been making numerous changes to your father's accounts and property holdings. While everything appears to be legally documented with your father's signature, the frequency and scope of these transactions is highly unusual." He pulled out a thick folder. "In the past 18 months, Marcus has transferred ownership of 3 restaurant properties to himself, liquidated 2 investment accounts worth approximately $800,000, and moved significant funds from your father's primary accounts into investments that list Marcus as the primary beneficiary." My hands were shaking as Wright continued. "Most concerning is that these changes were made during periods when your father's medical records show significant cognitive decline. I have expressed my concerns to Marcus, but he has provided documentation showing your father consent for each transaction. What kind of documentation? I asked. Signed authorization forms, power of attorney updates, and what appear to be written instructions from your father. However, I will say that your father's handwriting on recent documents looks remarkably different from his historical signature patterns. The room felt like it was spinning. Are you suggesting that Marcus has been forging Papa's signature? Wright chose his words carefully. I am suggesting that someone should conduct a thorough investigation into these transactions. If there has been financial elder abuse, it needs to be addressed immediately, both for your father's protection and for legal reasons. I left Wright office with photocopies of every suspicious document and a growing sense of betrayal that cut deeper than any romantic heartbreak I had ever experienced. This was my brother, the person who had taught me to ride a bike, who had protected me from bullies at school, who I had trusted completely. But the evidence was becoming undeniable. Marcus had been systematically stealing from our father, using Papa's diminished mental state to transfer family assets into his own name. The townhouse, the cars, the luxurious lifestyle. It was all built on money that belonged to Papa, money that should have been preserved for his care or eventually shared between us. That evening, I sat in my tiny apartment and calculated the scope of what Marcus had stolen. Based on Wright records, he had transferred or liquidated approximately $2.4 million in family assets over 18 months. Papa restaurants were profitable businesses worth significant money. But Marcus was positioning himself to inherit everything while leaving me and Papa with nothing. The most heartbreaking part was realizing how carefully Marcus had manipulated everyone. He had convinced me that Papa memory issues were worse than they actually were, dismissed my concerns as emotional overreaction, and presented himself as the responsible son taking care of difficult family business. Meanwhile, he was committing what amounted to elaborate elder financial abuse. I needed proof that would hold up in court, evidence that could not be dismissed or explained away. More importantly, I needed to protect Papa from further exploitation while there were still assets left to recover. But as I sat there, surrounded by financial documents and legal paperwork, I realized something else Marcus had no idea that I knew. He thought he was smarter than everyone else, that his careful manipulation would continue unchallenged. He had underestimated the quiet sister who just wanted to take care of Papa. That was going to be his biggest mistake. I spent the next 2 weeks building an ironclad case against Marcus. And what I discovered was even worse than I had imagined. Working with Wright and a private investigator named Detective Sarah Rodriguez, whom Wright recommended, we uncovered a web of financial manipulation that extended far beyond simple greed. Marcus had not just stolen from Papa. He had systematically planned to leave our father destitute while positioning himself as the devoted son managing difficult circumstances. The level of premeditation was stunning and cruel. Rodriguez's investigation revealed that Marcus had been researching elder financial abuse techniques online, reading articles about how to exploit power of attorney privileges, and studying the legal vulnerabilities of Alzheimer's patients. His browser history, which Rodriguez obtained through legal channels, showed searches like transferring property from dementia patient and how to change beneficiaries without family knowledge. More damaging was the handwriting analysis Rodriguez commissioned. 3 different certified experts confirmed that Papa's signature on recent financial documents had been forged. The pressure patterns, letter formations, and pen control were completely inconsistent with Papa's actual signature, even accounting for potential changes due to his medical condition. But the smoking gun was a recording I had made during one of my visits with Papa. Following Rodriguez's advice, I had started documenting Papa's lucid moments to establish that his cognitive decline was not as severe as Marcus claimed. During one particularly clear conversation, Papa had detailed his exact wishes for his estate distribution. "I want the business to continue running," Papa said clearly into my phone recorder. Marcus can manage operations, but ownership should be split equally between you and him. The house in Westchester goes to you, Mija, because you have always loved that garden. And there should be enough left over to make sure I can afford good care without being a burden. This recording directly contradicted every single financial transfer Marcus had made. Papa had never wanted to liquidate assets or change his estate planning. Marcus had fabricated the entire narrative about Papa wanting to simplify his affairs. Wright recommended that we involve the district attorney office immediately, since elder financial abuse in amounts exceeding $1 million constituted a serious felony in New York. We also needed to act quickly to freeze remaining assets before Marcus could transfer or hide more money. The confrontation I had been planning happened sooner than expected. Marcus appeared at my apartment unannounced on a Saturday morning, looking unusually agitated. "Lydia, we need to talk," he said, pushing past me into my small living room. "Wright called me yesterday asking questions about Papa finances." "What have you been telling him?" I had rehearsed this moment with Rodriguez, but my heart was still pounding. "I have been asking questions about discrepancies in Papa accounts, Marcus. Things that do not add up." His expression shifted from concern to something much darker. "What things, Papa is confused, Lydia? His memory is completely unreliable. I am trying to protect him from making terrible financial decisions. Like when he supposedly decided to transfer the Queen's restaurant property directly to you instead of keeping it in his name." Marcus' face went pale. "That was a strategic business decision. Papa understood that consolidating ownership would be more efficient for tax purposes." "Really? Because I have a recording of Papa from last week where he explicitly states he never wanted to sell or transfer any restaurant properties." The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus stared at me like I had grown a second head, clearly calculating how much I actually knew. "You cannot be recording Papa private conversations," he said finally. "That is a violation of his privacy, and anything he says cannot be trusted anyway." "Actually, I can record conversations with family members when I suspect elder abuse is occurring, and 3 different handwriting experts have confirmed that Papa's signature on your financial documents has been forged." Marcus' face went from pale to flushed red. "You had Papa handwriting analyzed, Lydia. What is wrong with you? I'm trying to manage a complicated situation, and you are acting like I am some kind of criminal. Are you? Because stealing $2.4 million from an elderly man with dementia sounds pretty criminal to me." The mask finally slipped completely. Marcus' expression turned cold and calculating, showing me a version of my brother I had never seen before. "You have no idea what you are talking about," he said quietly. "Papa wanted these changes made. If he is saying something different now, it is because his disease is getting worse. You cannot prove anything. And even if you could, no one would believe you over me. I am the one who has been managing his affairs responsibly while you played around with your little art projects. Actually, I can prove it, and I already have." I pulled out my phone and showed him photos of the forged signature analysis, the bank transfer records Wright had provided, and the timeline Rodriguez had constructed showing exactly when each fraudulent transaction had occurred. Marcus grabbed my phone, staring at the evidence with growing panic. "Where did you get these documents? These are private financial records." Wright provided them legally because he suspected financial elder abuse. "Oh, and Marcus, the district attorney office, received copies of everything yesterday morning." For the first time in my life, I watched my brother completely lose control. He started screaming about family loyalty, about how I was destroying our family over money, about how ungrateful I was for everything he had done to take care of Papa's difficult situation. But his rage revealed the truth he could no longer hide. In his fury, Marcus admitted to things I had only suspected. "You think this was easy?" he shouted. "Do you think I wanted to forge those signatures? Papa was being completely unreasonable about his estate planning. He was going to leave everything split equally between us, but I am the one doing all the work. I am the one managing the business, dealing with his medical care, handling all the responsibilities, while you just show up for fun visits. So you decided to steal his entire estate instead? I decided to take what I deserved. Papa does not understand business anymore. He would have made terrible decisions that destroyed everything he built. I was protecting his legacy. I kept my phone recording throughout his entire confession. Marcus was so consumed with justifying his actions that he never noticed. When he finally stopped screaming, I spoke very calmly. Marcus, you need to leave my apartment. The police will probably want to speak with you within the next few days. His face went white as the reality hit him. Lydia, you cannot be serious about pursuing this. I am your brother. My brother would not have stolen from Papa. My brother would not have forged signatures and manipulated a sick elderly man. I do not know who you are anymore, but you are not the person I thought I knew. Marcus left my apartment that day, but not before threatening to make my life hell if I continued with the investigation. He had no idea that his threats were also being recorded, or that his confession had just sealed his fate. The next phase would test everything I thought I knew about family loyalty and justice. The 48 hours after confronting Marcus were a whirlwind of legal preparations, family conversations, and strategic planning. I had naively assumed that once the truth was revealed, justice would swiftly follow. Instead, I discovered that exposing family financial abuse was far more complicated than simply presenting evidence to authorities. Detective Rodriguez warned me that white-collar crime cases, especially those involving family members, often became prolonged battles of credibility and resources. Marcus had advantages I had not fully considered. He controlled access to Papa, managed most of the family business operations, and had spent years building relationships with Papa doctors, lawyers, and business associates. Your brother is going to fight this aggressively, Rodriguez explained during our strategy meeting. He will claim that you are the one manipulating your father, that you are motivated by greed, and that your evidence is fabricated or taken out of context. Family financial abuse cases often become he said, she said situations unless you have overwhelming proof and credible witnesses. My first crucial ally emerged from an unexpected source. Carmen Vasquez, Papa, longtime housekeeper, had worked for our family for 15 years and knew Papa daily routines better than anyone. When I explained the situation to her, her reaction was immediate and passionate. I knew something was wrong, Carmen said, switching between English and Spanish as she became more agitated. Señor Roberto has been asking me about papers he supposedly signed, but he never remembers signing them. And Marcus has been coming to the house when your Papa is napping, going through his office, taking documents. Carmen had been keeping a detailed log of Papa's daily condition because she was concerned about his care. Her records showed that Papa's cognitive abilities fluctuated significantly. Some days he was sharp and articulate, other days he was confused and disoriented. Importantly, her notes indicated that many of the financial documents Marcus claimed Papa had signed were supposedly executed on days when Papa was having severe cognitive episodes. Also, Carmen continued, Marcus told me not to mention his visits to anyone, especially not to you. He said you would worry unnecessarily about Papa's condition and that it was better if you did not know about all the business matters he was handling. Rodriguez was thrilled with Carmen's testimony and documentation. A daily caregiver with 15 years of credibility and detailed records, that is exactly the kind of witness we need. My second major ally was Dr. Elena Martinez, Papa neurologist. Initially, she was hesitant to discuss Papa's condition due to medical privacy laws. But once I showed her the legal documentation establishing my concerns about financial elder abuse, she became far more cooperative. Dr. Martinez's review of Papa's medical records revealed a disturbing pattern. Marcus had been scheduling Papa medical appointments specifically on days when Papa cognitive symptoms were most severe, and he had been providing misleading information about Papa mental state to various doctors and legal professionals. Your father's condition is definitely progressive, but it is not nearly as advanced as some of these reports suggest, Dr. Martinez explained. Alzheimer's disease progression is not linear. Patients can have very clear periods mixed with confused episodes. Based on my examinations, your father retains significant decision-making capacity during his good days. She had also documented several instances where Marcus had pressured her to write stronger statements about Papa cognitive decline than her medical examinations supported. I was uncomfortable with some of his requests, but I assumed he was trying to ensure your father received appropriate care services. Dr. Martinez agreed to provide expert testimony about Papa's actual mental state and the timeline of his cognitive decline, which would be crucial for proving that he had the capacity to understand financial decisions during periods when Marcus claimed he was completely incapacitated. My third ally was the most surprising James Morrison, the accountant who had been handling Papa business taxes for over a decade. Morrison contacted me directly after hearing about the investigation through Wright Office. I have been deeply concerned about some of the financial changes Marcus has been requesting, Morrison said during our meeting. Several transactions required tax documentation that seemed inconsistent with your father's historical financial patterns. Morrison had been keeping detailed records of every unusual request Marcus had made, including several instances where Marcus had asked him to backdate documents or provide tax justifications for asset transfers that seemed legally questionable. I told Marcus that I was not comfortable with some of these arrangements, and he became very aggressive, threatening to move your father's business to another accounting firm if I did not cooperate. I should have reported my concerns earlier, but I was worried about losing a long-time client. Morrison financial records provided concrete evidence of the timeline and scope of Marcus' fraudulent activities, including several transactions that had required forged signatures and false statements about Papa's mental capacity. But building this network of allies also revealed the challenges I was facing. Marcus had not been idle since our confrontation. He had immediately begun a counteroffensive designed to discredit me and protect his position. Papa primary care physician Dr. Robert Chin had been told by Marcus that I was showing signs of psychological instability and that my accusations were the result of financial desperation and jealousy. Marcus had suggested that my concerns about Papa finances were motivated by my own money problems and that I was trying to manipulate Papa during his vulnerable moments. Two of Papa's business partners had also been contacted by Marcus with similar stories. He was painting me as the unstable sister who was taking advantage of Papa's confusion to make false accusations against the devoted son who had been responsibly managing family affairs. Most troubling was Marcus' attempt to isolate Papa from my influence. Carmen reported that Marcus had suggested to Papa that my frequent visits were causing him stress and confusion, and that it might be better if my visits were limited and supervised. Marcus told your Papa that you were asking him too many questions about money and that it was making his condition worse, Carmen whispered to me during a discreet phone call. Senor Roberto was very upset about this because he loves your visits, but Marcus made it sound like spending time with you was hurting his recovery. The emotional manipulation was devastating, but it also revealed how desperate Marcus was becoming. His attempts to turn Papa against me and discredit my allegations were actually creating more evidence of his controlling and manipulative behavior. Rodriguez helped me understand that this counteroffensive was typical in financial abuse cases. Abusers almost always try to isolate their victims and discredit anyone who threatens their control. She explained, "The fact that your brother is working so hard to limit your access to your father and turn other people against you actually supports our case." My alliance network was growing stronger, but the emotional toll was becoming intense. I was simultaneously trying to build a legal case, protect Papa from further manipulation, maintain my own emotional stability, and deal with the heartbreak of realizing that my brother was not the person I had always believed him to be. The breaking point came when Carmen called me late one evening, crying hysterically. "Marcus came to the house tonight when your papa was sleeping," she sobbed. "He was going through your father's bedroom looking for documents, and when I asked what he was doing, he told me that I was being fired. He said your papa had decided he needed different household help, someone who would not gossip about family business." Carmen had worked for our family for 15 years. She genuinely loved Papa and had provided him with consistent, excellent care. Firing her was not about household management. It was about removing another witness who could testify about Marcus' behavior and Papa's actual condition. "But that is not the worst part," Carmen continued. "Before he left, Marcus told me that if I said anything to you or anyone else about what I had seen, he would make sure I never worked for another family in New York. He said he had connections who could destroy my reputation." That was the moment I realized Marcus was not just a family member who had made bad financial decisions. He was someone who would systematically destroy anyone who threatened his control, regardless of how long they had loyally served our family. The gloves were coming off, and the real battle was just beginning. The betrayal came from the person I trusted most in my growing alliance network. 3 weeks after Carmen was fired, just as we were preparing to file formal criminal charges against Marcus, Detective Rodriguez called me with devastating news. "Lydia, we have a serious problem," Rodriguez said, her voice tense. "James Morrison contacted the district attorney office this morning and recanted his previous statements. He is now claiming that his earlier testimony was inaccurate and that he was pressured by you to misrepresent the financial records." The world seemed to stop spinning. Morrison had been our strongest witness, the professional accountant with decades of credibility, who had documented every suspicious transaction Marcus had requested. Without his testimony, our case would rely primarily on handwriting analysis and the recordings I had made, evidence that Marcus' legal team could potentially challenge. "How is that possible?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer. "Morrison claims he reviewed the records more carefully and realized he had misunderstood the nature of the transactions. He says your brother was actually handling legitimate business restructuring that he initially misinterpreted as fraudulent activity." My heart sank as Rodriguez continued. "But there is more, Lydia. Morrison also provided the DA office with what he claims is evidence that you have been manipulating your father during his confused moments, coaching him to make statements that support your accusations." The accusation was so absurd that I almost laughed, except for the fact that it could destroy everything we had worked to build. Morrison was claiming that the recordings I had made of Papa lucid moments were actually recordings of me feeding him lines during his cognitive episodes, taking advantage of his confusion to create false evidence. "Rodriguez, you know that is not true. You have heard the recordings. Papa is clearly speaking spontaneously about his own wishes and concerns." "I believe you completely," Rodriguez said. "But Morrison's testimony creates reasonable doubt about our evidence. He is a respected professional with no apparent motive to lie, which makes his recantation particularly damaging." What Rodriguez did not yet know, but what I was about to discover, was that Morrison's betrayal had been carefully orchestrated by Marcus through a combination of financial pressure and personal threats that revealed just how far my brother was willing to go to protect his crimes. The truth emerged 2 days later when Morrison's wife Patricia called me in tears. "Mrs. Montenegro, I cannot live with what my husband has done," Patricia sobbed over the phone. "Your brother threatened to destroy our family if James did not change his testimony." Patricia explained that Marcus had discovered that Morrison accounting firm had been making small errors in tax filings for several other clients, mistakes that were not intentional fraud, but could potentially result in professional sanctions if reported to the IRS. "Your brother told James that he had connections who could make sure those errors were reported and investigated, which would destroy our business and our reputation," Patricia continued. "But he also offered James a substantial consulting contract with your father restaurants if he would recant his testimony and support Marcus' version of events." The manipulation was both sophisticated and ruthless. Marcus had offered Morrison a choice between financial destruction and financial reward while framing the decision as protecting an elderly man from manipulation by his unstable daughter. "James feels terrible about what he has done," Patricia said. "He knows your brother is lying, but he was terrified of losing everything we have worked for. We have 3 children in college, and if our accounting firm was destroyed, we would lose our house, their education, everything." But Patricia had more devastating news. "There is something else you need to know. Your brother has been contacting other people in your support network making similar threats and offers. He told James that he was going to systematically discredit everyone who had been helping you." My worst fears were confirmed when Carmen called me that same evening. "Lydia, I am so sorry, but I have to go back to El Salvador," Carmen said, crying so hard I could barely understand her. "Marcus found out that my immigration status has some complications, and he said he would report me to authorities if I testified against him. I cannot risk being deported and separated from my family." The cruelty was breathtaking. Carmen had been in the United States legally for 15 years, but she had some minor documentation issues from her early years that could potentially be used against her by someone with connections and malicious intent. Marcus had threatened to destroy the life of a woman who had lovingly cared for our father for over a decade. Dr. Martinez was next. She called me the following morning to inform me that she could no longer provide testimony about Papa's condition. "I received a call from the medical board yesterday," Dr. Martinez explained carefully. "Someone filed a complaint alleging that I had violated patient confidentiality laws by discussing your father's condition without proper authorization. While I believe my actions were legally justified, given the elder abuse investigation, I cannot risk my medical license while this complaint is being reviewed." Marcus had systematically identified every person who posed a threat to his narrative and found ways to neutralize them through financial pressure, legal threats, or professional consequences. He had transformed my network of allies into frightened people who could no longer afford to tell the truth. The psychological warfare was devastating. I found myself questioning whether I was strong enough to continue fighting against someone who had so many resources and so few moral boundaries. Marcus had money professional connections and a willingness to destroy innocent people to protect his crimes. But the lowest point came when Papa himself began to turn against me. During what I expected to be a routine visit, Papa looked at me with confusion and suspicion that broke my heart. "Lydia mija, Marcus tells me you have been asking me questions about money and trying to make me say things that are not true," Papa said sadly. "He says you are having financial problems and that you are trying to take advantage of my illness." Marcus had spent hours with Papa during his confused moments, gradually convincing him that I was the one manipulating the situation. Papa's love for me was unchanged, but his ability to distinguish between truth and manipulation was compromised by his condition. "Papa, I would never try to take advantage of you," I said gently. "I love you, and I just want to make sure you are being treated fairly." "Marcus loves me too, and he says you are causing me stress with all these questions about signatures and money," Papa replied. "Maybe it would be better if you just visited to spend time together, not to talk about business things." I left Papa House that day feeling completely defeated. Marcus had successfully isolated me from the person I was trying to protect, turned my allies against me through threats and manipulation, and positioned himself as the victim of a disturbed sister, motivated by greed. That night, I sat in my apartment, surrounded by legal documents and evidence that suddenly seemed worthless without credible witnesses to support it. I had never felt so alone in my life. But sometimes, the darkest moments come right before unexpected help arrives from the most surprising sources. My salvation came from a source I never could have anticipated. Marcus' ex-wife, Isabella Romano, whom I had not spoken to since their bitter divorce 3 years earlier. Isabella contacted me through Wright office requesting a private meeting that would change the entire trajectory of my case. Lydia, I know we have not been close since Marcus and I split up, Isabella said when we met at a quiet coffee shop in Brooklyn. But I have been following the situation with your father through mutual friends, and I cannot stay silent anymore. Isabella looked nervous but determined as she pulled out a thick folder of documents. During our marriage, Marcus told me things about his financial arrangements that I now realize were admissions of criminal activity. At the time, I thought he was just being strategic about business planning, but after hearing about your investigation, I understand that he was confessing to elder abuse. The folder contained photocopies of emails, text messages, and financial documents that Isabella had kept from their divorce proceedings. Marcus had been sloppy about hiding his activities from his wife, apparently assuming that marital privilege would protect any conversations they had about his business dealings. Look at this email from 18 months ago, Isabella said, showing me correspondence between Marcus and a forger he had hired to create fake documents. Marcus was trying to hide this expense from our divorce settlement, so I kept copies of everything to make sure he was not hiding assets from me. The emails were devastating. Marcus had paid someone $15,000 to create false medical assessments, claiming Papa was completely incompetent, and another $12,000 for forged signatures on legal documents transferring property ownership. And here, Isabella continued, are text messages where Marcus bragged about manipulating your father doctors into writing stronger dementia assessments than Papa condition actually warranted. But Isabella's most damaging evidence was a recorded phone conversation she had secretly made during their divorce proceedings. Marcus had been trying to convince her not to seek alimony by claiming he had limited income while simultaneously bragging about the money he was extracting from Papa accounts. I am not some struggling business owner, Marcus could be heard saying on the recording. I have been systematically transferring Papa assets into my name for over a year. The old man is too confused to understand what he is signing, and Lydia is too naive to pay attention to family finances. By the time anyone figures out what I have done, I will have enough money to fight any legal challenges. Rodriguez was ecstatic when I brought Isabella evidence to her office. This is exactly what we needed, Rodriguez said, reviewing the documents and recordings. An ex-spouse with detailed records and no financial incentive to lie is incredibly credible. Marcus cannot claim that Isabella is being manipulated by you or motivated by greed. But Isabella had even more devastating information. During our marriage, Marcus told me about backup plans he had developed in case anyone ever questioned his financial management of your father's affairs, Isabella explained. He has been creating false medical records, forging additional signatures on documents that he has not used yet, and building relationships with corrupt professionals who will support his version of events if needed. Isabella revealed that Marcus had been working with a disreputable lawyer named Thomas Bradley, who specialized in helping wealthy individuals exploit elderly family members through legal manipulation. Bradley had been coaching Marcus on how to document Papa's supposed incompetence while simultaneously helping him transfer assets in ways that would be difficult to trace or challenge. Marcus also told me that if anyone ever seriously threatened his control over your father's money, he would have Papa declared completely incompetent and moved to a locked memory care facility where he could control all access and communication, Isabella said quietly. He said it would be easy to convince doctors that Papa needed institutional care if family members were causing him stress with financial questions. This revelation terrified me because it showed that Marcus was prepared to essentially imprison Papa to protect his crimes. The man I had grown up with, who had once been protective and loving, had become someone who would destroy Papa's quality of life to maintain his theft. Isabella also provided crucial information about Marcus' current financial situation that explained his desperation to protect the stolen assets. Marcus has been living far beyond his actual income for years, Isabella explained. His investment firm is actually struggling financially, and most of his apparent wealth comes from money he has taken from your father. If he loses access to those funds, he will face bankruptcy and potentially lose everything. Rodriguez immediately began working with Isabella to develop a comprehensive strategy for using this new evidence. We now had documented proof of premeditation, recorded confessions, and detailed evidence of ongoing criminal conspiracy. But our breakthrough also came with new dangers. Isabella was genuinely afraid of how Marcus might react when he discovered her involvement. "Marcus threatened me during our divorce proceedings," Isabella told Rodriguez during her official statement. "He said that if I ever tried to interfere with his business relationships or family affairs, he would make sure I regretted it. I have been afraid to speak up until now because I was not sure anyone would believe me or be able to protect me from retaliation." Rodriguez arranged for Isabella to receive temporary protection while we prepared to file enhanced criminal charges against Marcus. The DA office was now interested in pursuing felony charges for elder abuse, forgery, embezzlement, and conspiracy. Our new legal team also included a specialist in elder law attorney Sarah Kim, who understood the complexities of financial abuse cases involving Alzheimer patients. Kim helped us prepare documentation that would not only support criminal charges, but also seek immediate protection for Papa and recovery of the stolen assets. With Isabella evidence, we can now prove that this was not a family dispute or misunderstanding, Kim explained. This was systematic criminal activity designed to exploit an elderly man with cognitive impairment. The courts take these cases very seriously, especially when we have this level of documentation. Kim also helped us understand that we could seek emergency intervention to protect Papa from Marcus' control while the criminal case proceeded. We can petition for immediate guardianship protection for your father, which would freeze all financial transactions and ensure that he receives proper care while preventing further asset transfers. But the most important development was that Carmen agreed to return from El Salvador to provide testimony once she learned about Isabella's involvement in the protection measures Rodriguez had arranged. "If Mrs. Isabella is brave enough to speak truth about Marcus, then I must be brave too," Carmen told me during a video call from San Salvador. "Señor Roberto deserves people who will fight for him, not people who run away when things become difficult." Dr. Martinez also agreed to resume her cooperation once Isabella evidence provided legal protection for her testimony. "With this level of documented criminal activity, my medical testimony is clearly justified and necessary," Dr. Martinez explained. The alliance that had been systematically destroyed by Marcus' threats was rebuilding stronger than ever, supported by evidence that could not be discredited or explained away. Marcus had made one crucial mistake. He had never imagined that his ex-wife would become the instrument of his downfall. The final confrontation happened exactly 6 months after I had first discovered Marcus' crimes, but this time, the power dynamic was completely reversed. Instead of standing in my tiny apartment trying to convince my brother to confess, I was sitting in a federal courthouse watching him face multiple felony charges while surrounded by the evidence of his betrayal. The criminal trial moved swiftly once Isabella evidence was presented to the court. Marcus' legal team had prepared to defend against accusations from a desperate sister and questionable witnesses, but they were not prepared to counter recorded confessions, forged documents, and testimony from a credible ex-wife with no financial motivation to lie. Marcus' attempt to claim that Papa had willingly authorized all financial transactions collapsed when the court heard his recorded bragging about manipulating a confused elderly man. His claims that I was manipulating Papa for financial gain became laughable when Isabella testified about his detailed plans to exploit Papa's cognitive decline. The most devastating moment came when the judge listened to Papa's own recorded words expressing his actual wishes for his estate distribution. The contrast between Papa's clear, consistent statements about wanting to preserve his assets and split them fairly between his children versus Marcus' forged documents claiming Papa wanted to transfer everything to his son was impossible for even Marcus' lawyers to explain away. But justice extended beyond the criminal convictions. Marcus was sentenced to 7 years in federal prison for elder abuse, forgery, embezzlement, and conspiracy. The court also ordered complete restitution of all stolen assets, plus penalties and interest that brought the total financial judgment to over $3.2 million. More importantly, the court appointed me as Papa guardian ensuring that he would receive proper care while being protected from further financial exploitation. Papa moved into an excellent assisted living facility that specialized in Alzheimer care, where he could maintain his independence during good days while receiving support during confused periods. The recovery of Papa assets meant that his restaurant businesses could continue operating successfully, providing him with ongoing income while preserving his legacy. Carmen was hired back as Papa personal aide, and her immigration status was properly resolved through legal channels that Marcus had threatened to complicate. Isabella's courage in coming forward led to her receiving a significant reward from the recovered assets, acknowledging that her willingness to speak truth had been essential to stopping Marcus' crimes. She used the money to start a nonprofit organization helping other families deal with elder financial abuse. Dr. Martinez Wright and Rodriguez all received recognition for their professional integrity in supporting the investigation, despite Marcus' attempts to intimidate them. Their willingness to stand up against pressure and threats had been crucial to ensuring that justice prevailed. But the most meaningful outcome was watching Papa flourish once he was removed from Marcus' toxic influence. Away from the constant manipulation and stress, Papa's cognitive symptoms actually improved significantly. While his Alzheimer's disease continued to progress, he had many clear, happy days surrounded by people who genuinely cared about his well-being rather than his money. "Mija, I am so proud of you for fighting for what was right," Papa told me during one of his lucid moments about 3 months after Marcus' sentencing. "I was confused about many things, but I always knew in my heart that you loved me for who I am, not for what I could give you." The financial recovery also transformed my own life in ways I had never expected. As Papa guardian, and with his explicit permission, I used a portion of the recovered assets to purchase the Tribeca Penthouse where this story began. It was not about luxury or showing off wealth, but about creating a beautiful space where Papa could visit and where our chosen family could gather safely. Carmen often brought Papa to the penthouse for afternoon visits, where he would sit in the sunroom looking out at the city and tell stories about building his restaurant business from nothing. Wright and his family became regular guests for Sunday dinners, and Isabella visits helped Papa maintain connection to positive memories from before Marcus' betrayal. The penthouse also became a meeting place for our support network, the group of people who had fought together to protect Papa and seek justice. Rodriguez Dr. Martinez Kim and others would gather monthly to check on Papa's well-being and to discuss their ongoing efforts to help other families facing similar situations. Most surprisingly, the experience led me to discover a new career path. Working closely with elder law attorneys and investigators had shown me how much I enjoyed advocating for vulnerable people who were being exploited by family members. I enrolled in law school part-time while continuing to manage Papa Care with plans to specialize in elder abuse prevention. Carmen often joked that Marcus had inadvertently given me the best education possible in recognizing and fighting financial exploitation. "Señor Marcus thought he was so smart," Carmen would say, "but he taught you everything you needed to know to stop people like him." The most difficult part of recovery was processing the grief of losing the brother I thought I knew. Marcus had not just stolen money. He had stolen my trust, my sense of family security, and my belief that blood relationships meant unconditional love and protection. But therapy and time helped me understand that the brother I had loved was not the same person who had committed these crimes. The Marcus who had taught me to ride a bike and protected me from bullies was not a false memory. He was just someone who had been consumed by greed and entitlement until he became unrecognizable. Papa, during one of his wise moments, put it best: "Family is not just about blood, mija. Family is about people who choose to love and protect each other." Marcus stopped being family when he chose money over love. But look around you. You have built a beautiful family of people who chose to fight for what was right. The chosen family we had built through this ordeal was stronger and more loyal than any biological connection based solely on shared genetics. Carmen Isabella Rodriguez Wright, Dr. Martinez and others had proven that true family members are those who stand by you when standing up requires courage and sacrifice. As I finish telling you this story from my Tribeca penthouse, with Papa napping peacefully in the guest room and Carmen preparing his favorite meal in the kitchen, I am grateful for every painful lesson this experience taught me about justice, courage, and the real meaning of family. Marcus may have thought he was stealing my inheritance, but he actually gave me something far more valuable, the knowledge that I am strong enough to fight for justice, wise enough to recognize manipulation, and fortunate enough to be surrounded by people who choose love over greed. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and doing what was right? What would you have done if you discovered a sibling was stealing from your elderly parent? Drop a comment sharing your thoughts about family betrayal, and let me know if you think karma really does come around for people who exploit the vulnerable. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life justice stories that prove good people can triumph over manipulation and greed. Share this with someone who needs to hear that fighting for what is right is always worth it, even when the opponent is family. Thank you for joining me on this journey of heartbreak, justice, and healing. Remember that sometimes the family we choose proves stronger than the family we are born into, and that standing up for vulnerable people is always the right choice, no matter how difficult the battle becomes.